Hey, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. It's been a long time. What was it,
Yeah,
last summer, I guess?
yeah. Wow, where are you? In the shop?
I don't know what does it look like? A shop? That's a new one. What does it look like? It does look like
Wow.
a shop, doesn't it? No, I'm in my home office right now.
Wow. Good,
This is
good,
my
good.
this is I have a standing desk here that I'm facing, and I do all of my work here. And as you can see, I never go thirsty.
That's
Never have a problem with that.
yeah,
It's good to
yeah.
see you, Pablo.
Yeah, good to see you. Let me introduce a little bit in Spanish because some people they might want to have
Oh,
a close up, or you can do it. You were in Sevilla at some point in your life, right?
that was 100 million years ago. So my Spanish is incredibly rusty. Please, please, please.
Ok, ok. Pues hoy tenemos el placer de contar con Christopher Pellegrini, que es una eminencia en el mundo de los destilados japoneses, el Shochu y Awamori. Y yo lo conocí en una sesión de una radio en Tokio que coincidí con él, vamos, hablando de sake. Y siempre he tenido admiración por el tema de los destilados japoneses, aunque nunca entraba mucho en materia. De hecho, solo importamos muy poco, solo un producto de Okinawa, el Awamori, y de Shochu tenemos hecho algo con Dasai, que tiene uno, y poco más. Y hoy, lo siento otra vez, será todo en inglés. Y si hay alguna pregunta, siempre me olvido, pero bueno, me la pasáis por aquí, se la preguntamos. Okay, so here we are.
Thank you.
I introduced you, I guess something you pick up, but nothing new to you. And well, to me also it's actually a learning session today, because I didn't get into much into soju or other distilled liquors in Japan, but I must say that when I lived in Japan, that was 2000 to 2003. You arrived a little bit. You arrived 2003, right? The first. Is it?
That's right. Right at the end of 2002, so we kind of overlapped for a little bit.
We were there. At that time, I got into sake because I explained a couple of times in this session, I didn't like beer. And the only drink I could have is wine. But of course, I didn't have much money, and I got into sake. But at that time, I remember that sake was not very popular, but soju was popular. There was a boom. I think the first boom.
Yeah, it was a big one.
Yeah.
And
So
it was
everybody was like, "Wow, no, don't drink sake. Just go to soju." And to me, it was like, okay, I want something between wine, something. So I much prefer sake. But let me know, how did you get into this? Because you were at that time, and how did you get into this?
So I guess it goes back to when I was in high school, and as part of a project for a history class, I learned about making alcohol at home. So me and my very close friend started making beer. We made homebrew when I was in high school, and it was okay. It was actually kind of good.
But what was it? Sorry, was it to get high or something, or make business, or just?
Originally it was just like, hey, we should do that. So we did. And then it turned out, after a lot of trial and error, actually some of our beer was quite tasty. So then our friends wanted to have it, and other people. And so it kind of turned into, I don't want to talk too much about it because it's highly illegal. But anyways, I developed a very intense interest in basically handmade small batch drinks, really, craft, essentially. This was back in, 90, 92 about. And then eventually my parents found out that I was brewing at home. And so they said, no more. And I was like, yeah, okay. So then I went to a local brewery, a very small brewery, and I said, hey, can I be an apprentice or something? I want to learn more about this. And over time, and through a lot of luck, I actually became a brewer.
Wow.
And I was I believe, the youngest brewer in America for a while. I was too young to drink, because you know the drinking age in America is 21. And I was making craft beer, and I was very, very happy with myself. And so, you know, I was very proud of that job, and I really developed a very strong interest in all drinks that, you know, people will line up to purchase. They, you know, this is the good stuff. We traveled to go get that. It's limited supply, you know, this sort of thing I became very interested in. So fast forward a few years, and I had lived in Spain. I lived in Sevilla for a while, and then I moved to South Korea, and then I moved here. And that was at the end of 2002, right during that big honkaku shochu boom. And actually, I didn't know what shochu was. I had never heard of shochu before. I didn't know the word. I only knew about sake. And so I started studying sake. It was the first time in my life to have really good sake, and I was overjoyed. I loved it. I was so happy that the sake in Japan was much better than the sake that I had experienced in America. That was a really, really gratifying experience for me. And then just one, you know, I was studying sake. I was drinking as much as I could find. And then one day, a bartender said, "Hey, today, drinking this." And that was a barley shochu. And I was just like, that was the beginning of something crazy. I was like, what is this? This is not sake. He's like, no, it's shochu. I'm like, shochu? What's shochu? He's like, shochu, just drink it. And so that's how I started. And I think something that really spoke to me as a you know, a craft otaku, you know, and I know you're also a craft alcohol otaku. The thing that really interested me was that nobody could explain shochu to me. Nobody had any information. There was no Wikipedia page, right? There was nowhere to go to learn about shochu. So I had to go to Kyushu. I had to go down there, and I had to learn for myself. And I didn't speak any Japanese at that time. My first Japanese expression was, of course, arigatou gozaimasu. My second Japanese expression, probably my second, was awa nashi de kudasai, which basically means don't put all that head on my beer. I want beer, not foam. And that was, I think, the second expression that I learned. So I went down there, and I fortunately met some friendly people eventually, and they started to explain it to me, or they at least showed me. They couldn't explain it to me in Japanese. I couldn't understand at that time, but that was the beginning. So it was a long time ago, and it's been a really, really exciting journey. And I'm happy that, you know, what started as a high school experiment and a high school history project turned into a career. I'm incredibly happy about that. I'm very, very lucky.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And also it's when this kind of jobs that you blend your passion with something that you get as well some money, but also you it's a way of life, and you're enjoying drinking, and it's good. I don't know, that's another thing I wanted to ask you, because I mean, sake is not that alcoholic, and you can drink every day, you enjoy. But I don't know, well, there are some shochu that are quite alcoholic, and it's something that I don't know yourself, but for me it would be very hard to drink every day shochu. But let me know about it.
That's a very fair point. I mean, undiluted shochu that has, or genshu, the genshu ABV for sweet potato shochu, for instance, this is one that I'm one of my favorites. This is called Rokudaime Yuri. And this, probably coming off of the still, is about 37 or 38% alcohol. It's a sweet potato shochu. Rice shochus, barley shochu probably will come off the still somewhere 40% or a little higher. But honkaku premium shochu cannot be bottled higher than 44.9% ABV. So 44.9 is the limit.
Yeah.
So, you're lower than, if you're a whiskey drinker, that's no problem. If you're a gin drinker, that's easy. Tequila, mezcal, no problem, right? Now, most shochu, and this is one of them, is diluted a little bit. This is diluted from 37, 38 down to 25%. And that's standard in the honkaku shochu industry. And do people drink it straight? In Japan, not so often. Usually it's mixed with cool water, hot water. These days, very commonly with soda, with club soda. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of finding the sweet spot for you. And that's why so many people in Japan drink shochu during a meal.
Yeah.
Because it's a good palate cleanser. It tends to complement the meal. It doesn't overpower the meal. And, for instance, my favorite serving style is with hot water. And I fill the hot water up to about here, and then slowly pour in the sweet potato shochu. And then the mix is maybe 15% alcohol.
Wow.
12, so
Wow.
It's wine territory. It's Nihonshu territory. It's not going to be, it's not
now
going
I
to
get
be
your
super
point.
strong.
Yeah, because for here in Spain, I guess in Europe and in the US, it's kind of hard to give a warm drink with alcohol. It's already hard with sake, but with this, how did you? For these people that are listening to us, and they are these people, they are too freaky drinking hot water with distilled alcohol. What is the pleasure you get from that? What do you think? You get more flavors, or is what is your feeling about?
Yeah. It's similar to the experience of having a really well prepared okan, or warmed sake. When it's done well, the bouquet, the aromas are fantastic. You get a little bit more of the sweet notes from the ingredients that were used to make the drink. And shochu is no different. Awamori is the same as well. Awamori, although it's not so common, is often very, very good with hot water. Now, I understand many people outside of Japan are not going to think of that as a great choice. In fact, a lot of people don't like the idea of mixing shochu or awamori or any alcohol with water. And I can understand that. Yeah. Especially if the shochu is 25% alcohol already, why do you need to dilute it more? That's a great question. I can totally understand that point of view. But for me, the hot water really boosts the bouquet. You get a lot of nice earthy notes, a lot of light sweet notes. You get all of the the soul, the spirit of the shochu comes out with heat. So I'm a big fan. I drink it's called oyuwari. Oyu is hot water. Wari means cut. Yeah. And I drink it even in August. I'm a little bit crazy and a little bit old school like that. A lot of my friends think I'm nuts. They think I'm crazy. But, that's the way I like it. And you don't have to follow my lead. On the rocks is a very common drinking style with a little bit of cool water. And when I say a little bit, I mean a lot. Many times, mizuwari is actually not like with a little bit of whiskey, you pour a little bit in and open it up. Actually, many times it's about 50-50 in terms of the mix. Yeah. There's a lot of dilution that goes on, and it just makes it easier to pair with food, I think. And that's a big deal in Japan. And it might not be the preferred way in some other cultures, but, shochu and awamori are very flexible that way. So you can find your preferred style. Okay, I have here a glass with ice. Okay. I was thinking, and I have a bottle of this Okinawa Zuisen. I have a bottle right here. Oh, I have Zuisen too. So I actually didn't bring hot water. I would if I knew, but now I will put this. But my experience with shochu was that the ones that they offer me in the bars or in the izakaya were like the potato or barley, and to me were like strong. But then I found out when I went to Okinawa
that you would explain better than me, of course, that it's awamori is basically shochu, no, but made with rice, but not the Japanese. Well, not the Japanese rice that is used in sake, but it's more on the indica, right? Is it the more long? Yeah, and
that's absolutely
but I found it more fine in a way. Now, of course, I like other shochu, but at the beginning there was less shocking for me, for my palate, to have awamori than imo shochu or other things. So what now? I guess it's like sake when you start with the ginjo, and then you get tired and you go more on the other. Yeah.
You end up lower down, or in Honjozo territory. Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely, there's a starting point for everyone. I think, and a lot of people will explain this in a similar way. It depends on what you normally drink. If you're a red wine drinker, if you're a tequila drinker, if you're a mezcal fan, sweet potato shochu is probably going to, especially red sweet potatoes, will have something similar to the tannins that are not nearly on the same level. We'll have something recognizable. A red or a sweet potato shochu will be understandable for a red wine lover. And then a lot of the smokiness and the earthiness and the ashy minerality in sweet potato shochu will be very interesting for a lot of tequila drinkers and mezcal drinkers. On the other hand, if you're a rum drinker, kokuto, right? You've got from the Amami Islands, it's basically a cane sugar style shochu that's made with, well, it's actually not from the cane directly. They make this incredibly lush, thick, kokuto sugar, these cakes of really, really dark sugar that are so rich. They're not refined, they're barely refined. Very high quality Japanese kokuto is absolutely lovely. And in the Amami Islands, as long as the starter, the first fermentation, if that's a rice koji in the starter, and then second fermentation is this kokuto sugar, rum drinkers, and especially maybe agricole fans, are going to love that stuff.
Wow.
It's grassy, molasses, caramel. It's fantastic, right? Wow. Then you've got white wine drinkers. You've got, sake drinkers, of course, Nihonshu fans. Rice shochu. Rice shochu, especially made with a vacuum still, is going to have light, very lovely, sometimes ginjoka. So some of the Nihonshu fragrances. I'm talking apples, and I'm talking melon, and a little bit of banana, and you do get that nuance in there.
Yeah.
So it's easy to understand. So my point of view is that there's really kind of a low barrier to entry. The only problem with shochu and awamori included is that there's too many doors. There's too many ways to get in, and there's not enough information. Now, you said you started with awamori. You're right. That is like a rice shochu with more rules. It can only be made in Okinawa if it's going to be called Ryukyu Awamori. But it also it uses the Thai rice or the indica mai, and it must be made with black koji. That's a rule.
Yeah.
The one thing that it has in common with shochu awamori, which is essentially shochu's uncle, it's a little older than shochu probably.
Yeah.
The thing that it has in common is that all of these things are distilled in a pot still. So there's they're lower alcohol percentages, of course, but the wonderful thing is that these drinks taste like the grains or the tubers or the vegetables that they're made from. So sweet potato shochu tastes like sweet potatoes, right? Kokuto shochu tastes like it smells like a light rum that's not nearly as sweet as a rum.
Yeah.
So it tastes like what it's made from, and it's a rabbit hole. I mean, once you start down there, goodbye. I mean, you're not coming back out. It's like years of exploration to even start to get the hang of it.
And there is a history in I mean, Where is that the first started with rice or with potato? There's any kind of history behind the shochu or?
Absolutely, yes, yes. I mean, as far as we know, the first shochu per se was probably made with rice, and there are a couple of different areas that started with rice shochu traditions. The most famous rice shochu tradition is called kuma shochu, and it's made in one specific area of Kumamoto Prefecture, and it's an all rice fermentation, and that's it. And it tends to be very light and very fragrant, although there are some styles that are made on are distilled with an atmospheric still. They tend to have a lot more dairy notes, a lot more depth of flavor to them, and a lot more interesting aromas. But yeah, rice shochu was early on, just because they were making rice everywhere. You know, it was the main staple. Barley shochu probably followed a little while after that. I said kuma shochu, that's actually GI. That's actually protected by the WTO. Just like, you know, just like
how many there are now in Japan?
For international ones, for shochu, there's 3. For Awamori, there's 1. And then for shochu, there's also a Japan only appellation, which is for the Kokuto dark sugar shochu that is only made in the Amami Islands. It can only be made there. If it's made anywhere else, it gets taxed as a different product. It's crazy. But the barley shochu that started on Iki Island, that's called Iki Jochu, that's protected internationally. And then the third one is the sweet potato shochu, which is made in Kagoshima Prefecture. If you use all local processes and ingredients, you can label it as Satsuma shochu, which is also protected internationally. So I guess technically there's 4 international ones and then 1 regional one.
Okay. And as we can see in sake, there are many breweries now, especially abroad, that are coming up. Is there any shochu brewery outside Japan?
There are a couple, and but I've only personally been to one, and this one I visited twice. It's called the Hawaiian Shochu Company, and it's on Oahu, on the North Shore. It's run by a wonderful couple, the Hiratas, and Hirata-san used to be a kurabito for Manzen, and I've got a Manzen product right here, and then the Hawaiian Shochu Company, they make a brand called Namihana.
Oh.
And Namihana is a very, very limited production. I think he does 2 vintages per year. It's a sweet potato shochu made with sweet potatoes from the Hawaiian Islands. But he uses a style that is very, very Satsuma. He basically is making Satsuma shochu, but he can't call it that because he's in Hawaii. He's very old school. He does everything by hand. It's all tezukuri. It's impressive. Wow. And he's doing great things. There's another new, there's a couple more places that are making shochu. I'm not as familiar with them. One of them is in Maryland, making a brand called Umai. And I haven't tried it, but I do know that my very close friend Stephen Lyman has tried it, and he said that it's like if it was a blindfolded taste test, they make barley shochu, you wouldn't know that it wasn't made in Japan. It's that good. So I was like, okay, yeah, I definitely have to get some of that.
Yeah.
But I haven't tried it yet. So yeah, there's a little bit happening. Nowhere like, I mean, in the Nihonshu world, there's kura popping up here, there, and everywhere right now. It's pretty amazing. That hasn't happened yet with the shochu world. We'll see.
Then coming back to the koji, normally is white koji for all, and in Okinawa they use the black koji. Is it that right? Or
yeah, white koji is the standard for shochu, although there's no rule. So you will find even sweet potato shochu that's made with yellow koji. Shochu uses all 3 major families, yellow, black, and white.
Yeah. Wow. So you now there is a trend for getting more acidity into sake to use the white koji. Do you see any trend now in the shochu about using not particularly the koji, but maybe other elements to make a certain style of soju, or is more like protected in a way than sake? Because I don't know if what do you think? There is a like a fashion going to maybe more kind of easy to drink shochu, or going back to the more heavy? What do you think?
You know, it definitely is moving more towards the, I guess you could say, lighter styles that are far more fragrant, and fragrant in something of a fruit or floral way. That's been happening a lot
Yeah.
recently. And since I came to Japan, you know, nearly 18 years ago, the shochu that's available on the market in Tokyo and even down south, where most really good honkaku shochu is made, you know, it really has kind of gotten calmer. Not nearly, it's not your grandfather's shochu anymore. And I think that's what a certain generation of Japanese was kind of horrified by. It used to be incredibly fragrant is one word, pungent might be another, and they don't make that shochu anymore, much to some people's chagrin, like this guy. But they still now they're experimenting more, and there's the area where there's a lot of room for experimentation is in the sweet potato category. Now, sweet potato shochu is the best seller by ingredient in Japan. It sells more than any of the others. Number two, actually not very far behind, is barley shochu. After that, there's a lot of distance. So number one and number two are big, and sweet potato shochu is the biggest in terms of consumption. And in the sweet potato shochu category, there are so many different types of sweet potato. It's not just one type of, it's not one tuber. There's probably 5 dozen.
Wow.
Or close to 5 dozen different varieties of sweet potato that are used to make sweet potato shochu these days. And they're finding new ways to work with sweet potatoes that they didn't know they could use before. Now, these sweet potatoes go from, on one end, the super like white as paper, fleshy sweet potato that is like Kogane Sengan is really, really white, all the way to garnet, ruby, just super deep purple, and everything in between. You've got sweet potatoes that are orange, and they you know, beta carotene. It's amazing. And they are now producing these very, very fragrant, very interesting sweet potato expressions that weren't even considered 5 years ago. Maybe, yeah, 5 years ago. It wasn't even on the map. This is a new trend in the honkaku shochu industry. Everybody's trying to do something new and exciting. So I think there's going to be a lot more experimentation in this part of the industry moving forward.
Wow. And there are also breweries that are producing in the same facilities, like sweet potato with rice or mugi or other stuff, or normally is one brewery doing only one sort of shochu?
That's a great question. As some people, well, just so that you know, almost all sweet potato shochu is made with rice. So the starting fermentation is a rice fermentation, and the secondary fermentation is steamed, shredded sweet potatoes. Are there distilleries that make both sweet potato and barley? Yeah, there are a few. And most of those, there's a couple in northern Kagoshima and then a few in Miyazaki Prefecture. Ones that come to mind are like Yanagita-san and Kuroki-san are both doing both, and they do them very well. But a lot of the time, distilleries choose to focus on one main ingredient. And in Kagoshima, that's basically sweetpotato.com. That's what they do. And they don't really mess with a whole lot of other stuff. Except for that now some people are making gin and some other places are making whiskey too, and that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
But generally there's a lot of focus. Now, having said that, one of my favorite distilleries also in Miyazaki Prefecture, Ochiai-san, he makes basically anything. He makes so many different things. You know, he makes a lot of delicious sweet potato shochu. He also makes an amazing ginger shochu. He makes he made a really good green pepper shochu. I remember a long time ago. He's a scientist. He does a lot of experimentation. He loves to play around, and I really respect that about him. And but he's kind of the outlier. He's a little bit more non-conventional in that sense. Most places are very stick with what they do well.
Wow. You know, I'm here in Spain it's like 4:30, but I'm kind of enjoying this, and I put a lot of ice and now it's melting, but I found it, as you said at the beginning, and it's something that I knew before, but now it didn't come up. It's probably a fine drink to have with a meal, because it's not that, and there's some acidity as well, so it could be interesting. So, you know, people try to stick, this is distilled thing, then you have it after lunch, or here in Spain you go to a bar or cocktail or wherever. But yeah, it's true. In Japan, you see it more in izakaya, and you can enjoy it while eating. So it's really interesting. Good.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I know that in some parts of the world, maybe you eat first, then you drink. But I mean, even where I'm from, people have wine with dinner. They have beer with dinner. Well, you know, I know it's going to take a little while. Yeah. But there's this other category of drinks that has a lot of flexibility, and you know, so it's something that hopefully will be considered in the future. I think it's going to take forever, but it's a fun endeavor. It's a fun battle, and I'm really excited about it.
How is the situation in I mean, soju around the world? Is like getting famous, or you see some I don't know, like sake, for instance, now it seems to be very popular all over the world, but I don't know, shochu, how is, what is the situation now?
Yeah, it's still, I think we can pretty much say that shochu and awamori are Japan's best kept secrets. And I say that all the time, but it is still unfortunately the case. And I think we're getting to a point where there's enough recognition of this category, and there's enough understanding that, oh, there's this other drink out there that is sometimes confused with a drink from Korea, which causes a lot of confusion, a lot of problems. But there's this other category of drink from Japan that we don't know about, and people are starting to take notice. And you're seeing it show up a little bit more often in the media. People are writing about it generally. And there's a number of books that are mentioning it. Of course, Stephen Lyman and Chris Bunting's book, the guide, I have a copy of it right here. The Complete Guide to Japanese Drinks does an excellent job of explaining shochu and awamori. You've also got Jeremy Umansky's recent book on koji that came out, and that's a great way to really understand, you know, not only shochu and awamori, but all of Japanese cuisine. And this is great. We're inviting in people with a food background, and this is going to make life so much easier. If people get koji, that's huge, right? So I'm really excited about that, and I really like the idea of attaching all of these things to Japanese koji culture. You know, without koji, you don't have Japanese food, you don't have Japanese drinks. So I think that's a really good in, and I think everything's kind of moving in the same direction, in the right direction right now, to bring this culture and these drinks to a whole lot of people that wouldn't have noticed even a couple of years ago. And it's great for the Nihonshu world as well. And hopefully, you know, just this huge tide of koji excitement will make life a little bit easier for all of us.
Hope so. Yeah, true. And you said before about the Korean soju. Is it different in what ways?
Great question. So soju, Korean soju, is basically designed to, how do I summarize this without seeming rude? I used to live in Korea. I understand it, so I'm not just saying this because I heard it from somebody. Korean soju is essentially a vodka that is watered down into the high teens these days. When I lived in Korea, it was 22, 23% alcohol. These days, it's 16, 17, 18%. And it has a lot of sweeteners added to it. So it's not the same drink it used to be. It's chilled. It's served in large shot glasses, and you drink it it's a very communal drink, and you drink it quickly. It's designed to be a palate cleanser for spicy food. It's very effective in that case, and it's designed to be cheap. So one of those little green, one of those bottles is yeah, exactly. Those are going to be very affordable, and that's the whole play. And if you go to Korea, you will go through those green bottles at a very quick pace if you're with friends. And it's lovely. It's fantastic. I adore it. I always can't wait to get back to it. However, that's essentially a vodka. It's a multiply distilled, up to probably 96% ethanol, as high as pure a proof as you can make with alcohol. And then it has really no flavor, no aroma that is related to whatever ingredients were used to make the alcohol. And then they water it back down to bottling proof. So that's what's called, they use a patent still or a column still or a continuous still. It has lots of different names. You can't use that still to make proper shochu in Japan. You have to use a traditional pot still. And these things used to be made out of clay, right? They used to be, you used to light a fire under them, and then you try to catch with the alcohol when it jumps out there, recondense it into liquid, and then there you go. There's your drink. Of course, the stills these days are much more modern, and many whiskey fans will be surprised to know that shochu stills are made from steel, not copper. That's maybe a time for another Instagram live conversation. Wow. But it's a drink that is much lower proof, and often lightly diluted, mostly for tax reasons. Historically, 25% was the maximum until the next price hike in terms of taxes. At 26, it gets taxed at a different rate. So sweet potato, honkak shochu, or typical premium, authentic, traditional shochu from Japan, is single distilled. It's a very, very craft, very much more expensive drink to make and to bottle and to sell. So soju and shochu are kind of at different ends of the spirit spectrum.
Okay.
Soju is more on the vodka side. Shochu is more on it's on the craft side. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's small batch craft spirit.
Yeah. And what about aging? Is there like because I see, for instance, I know the Zuisen have like the 10 years old, 20 years old, things like that, but I think they age it in these vessels, right?
In tanks?
In tanks, right?
Or do you mean in pots?
Yeah, in pots, no? Yeah.
Well, Awamori is really special, actually, because they have, now these days, a lot of larger distilleries will age in tanks, and there's nothing wrong with that. You get a very nice, soft treatment of the genshu. But historically, they would, and still today in many places, they age in these very large clay pots, and they're unglazed, usually. So there is you get UV light that can be affecting the drink. You get a little bit of exposure to oxygen. There's some oxidization of the spirit. And even better, Awamori has kind of a solera tradition, like in Spanish sherry.
Wow.
Yeah. So they do the whole, you're gonna fill your bottle, or you're gonna fill your pot to take home. You take it from the oldest vintage, and then you add the next oldest vintage to the oldest one, and so on down the whole line of, what do they call them in sherry? Is it clases or something like that? It's like the different vintages side by side.
Yeah.
And that's called shitsugi in Japanese.
Yeah.
And it's an old tradition.
The crianza, solera. Yeah. Wow.
Right. Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah, so they have that very cool. Yeah, that's a huge plus for Awamori, that old aging style. Now, 10-year-old Awamori, you know, if it's 10 years old, that means that the youngest distillate in that bottle is 10 years old. There might be some older things mixed in there as well. But yeah, there's a, you know, aging is a big thing in Awamori and Shochu as well. Now you've got clay pots, you've got tanks, which are economical, efficient, easy to clean, and don't add anything to the flavor profile. And then more recently, well, at least, you know, recently, I'm saying the last 50 years or so, and especially the last 20, barrel aging everywhere, right? And there's a lot of sherry casks. There's a lot of ex-bourbon casks that are being imported into Japan for aging purposes. And this has just created all of these new, you know, all of these new products. There's a lot of exciting stuff out there. Having said that, you can't age in barrels for too long. There's a rule. Back in the 90s, the WTO got angry because Japan was essentially taxing imported whiskey differently from barrel-aged barley shochu. You know, they're both made with barley, and they're both barrel-aged, so they're both brown. And the WTO was like, you can't do that. That's where we come and stomp on all of your heads. And Japan was like, come on, we make this with koji. They make it with malt. It's totally different. And they're right, it is totally different, but the WTO didn't care. So in response to that near miss, it was a scary situation, I suppose. The taxation authorities in Japan made a color limit. And so what that means is that you can't really let your shochu get too dark. You know, everything that's distilled is perfectly clear. Whiskey's perfectly clear when it comes off the still. It's the barrel that gives it the color. So most shochu is actually perfectly clear. Or as they say in the WSET world, water white. Am I right? So it's as clear as water. But barrel age it turns a little bit corn, a little bit, you know, a little bit straw color, a little golden, a little amber. It gets darker and darker and darker the longer you leave it. 0.08 is the limit of color, and that's not very dark. 0.0, do I have any here? I probably do, but it'll take me too long to find it.
This is not, but it would be like this color maybe, or lighter?
That would be about maybe right on the edge. Right on the edge. That might be too dark, actually.
That's funny. They do this. It's incredible. I didn't
if you keep it light, it can be bottled and taxed as shochu. If it's too dark, different class.
Amazing.
A lot of rules.
Yeah, man. So, Chris, you at some point you got into this world, and as many of us find that Japan has some kind of secrets that you want to discover, but there's no information, and you decided to dip into it, and then you wrote a book, which is very well. It's the most famous book, I guess, in spirits from Japan. Was it hard for you to get all this, or all the information? And
you know, honestly, it was really, really challenging. It just wasn't. When I started getting excited about shochu and awamori, there just wasn't any information available that was not written in Japanese, and I didn't speak Japanese, and I didn't plan to be in Japan for more than a year. And then, but you know how that goes. You come to Japan, you don't leave really.
For me, 3 months.
Or if you do,
plan was 3 months, 3 years.
Yep, exactly. I had a 1-year plan. 1 year became 5. 5 became 10, and now like I don't even know how to say my home state's name anymore.
You can still escape, eh? You can still escape.
Well, you can if you escape, but what happens is when people leave, they always come back, right? It's amazing, right? They think they need to go, and then they come back. But anyways, it was a real challenge, and I was visiting so many distilleries in the early days, and I was really learning a lot from the good people who are making these drinks. And I just decided I wanted to share these stories. And eventually that led to me saying, the easiest way for me to really share is to write a book, perhaps. Get it all in one place and put it out in the world. And it was funny because when I was writing that book, I pretty quickly, not quickly actually, disappointingly, it took me a long time to realize this. I realized that nobody's going to read this. I'm just some weirdo I'm just a geek from the United States who happened to fall in love with this, is fascinated by this. I have no authority to be talking about this. Nobody's going to read my book. So then it struck me, well, maybe there's a certification for this. And lo and behold, there was the Shochu Kikisakeshi course and certification to become a Shochu sommelier, if you want to use that word.
Yeah.
And so I was all excited, and I ordered, I paid, and I was ready to go. And then at some point along the line, I realized, oh yeah, I don't read or write Japanese. Oh. And of course, this damn test is going to be in the wrong language. So I still have the textbook. This book almost killed me.
Wow.
So this is several years old now. And I started right at the beginning, as you should always do, and I had my dictionary out, and I went kanji by kanji, reading through the first page. And on the first page, the first day, I almost died the first day. There's like, no way I'm going to get this done. It took me, I don't know. I was in a cafe in downtown Tokyo. It probably took me 2 hours to read a paragraph, and not even to understand it, just to get the basics of what all the pictographs or the ideograms meant. And then eventually, but I stuck with it because I was determined, and I'm a little stubborn like that. And eventually I could read, in a day I could read a whole page, and then I could read 2 pages in a day. And then all of the kanji were being repeated, of course. There was a lot of repetition. I was learning all of this really useless kanji that I can never use in daily life. But I was getting it. And then I was able to kind of flip through a few pages in one day. And then I could go back and search for information that I needed, and I could find it quickly, and it was getting better and better. And I finished the textbook, and there's another textbook as well. And then I was like, let's just read it again. So I read it a second time. And then the test itself, the tasting was, there's a blind tasting, and they spike the drinks with oils and stuff to make sure you should be able to, it's pretty easy to smell. It smells like butt, but it's a blind tasting, and there's 3 other parts of the exam where it's just all writing. It almost killed me. I mean, it was not a shochu test for me. That was a language test. Wow. I was the last person in the damn room for all 4 except for the tasting. The other 3 sections, the last person in there, right up to the wire on every one. I was like, oh, and I passed by the skin of my teeth.
Wow.
But
wow.
And then that's where I solidified a lot of my knowledge. I got the really textbook knowledge from that course. Of course, the textbook knowledge isn't necessarily how they always do it in the real world, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But it's good to see both sides. It really is good to see both sides. And so that was how I indoctrinated myself into the world of Shochu and Awamori, and that gave me the confidence to push my book over the finish line. And since I'm showing everybody's book, I might as well show mine as well. Mine is the Shochu Handbook.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's a good starting point, I hope. And hopefully also, in addition to this book, very soon there will be several very useful websites that people who are interested in Shochu should be able to rely on as the content builds. The best one right now is certainly kanpai.us, which is governed by, I mentioned him before, Stephen Lyman. And then I have my own website, which is more faced towards, it's a little bit more industry news centric, and that's called shochu.pro.
Okay.
But hopefully there will be a lot of other people who start to get excited about Shochu and Awamori and start to put their own content out in the world, and nothing would make us happier. I mean, that's the one thing that I really hope can come of all of these, all of this, is that Shochu moves more into the Nihonshu model, where you have really legitimately expert people popping up all over the world.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, especially considering where Nihonshu was just 25 years ago.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
And of course, Pablo, you're a huge part of that in Spain. And hopefully you can do the same for us with Awamori.
Yeah. That's also I wanted to ask you, because there are also competitions in Japan about the the national tastings and all that. There's same things for shochu as well, or
Yeah, I mean they not nearly on the same scale, not even close. There was, it got canceled, of course, but there was the Japan whiskey and shochu competition that was supposed to be held in March, but it got postponed to May, and then it got canceled again. I don't know when it's going to happen. That's really good because for the first time, they're actually making shochu its own real dedicated part of the competition. And there are certainly some international tasting competitions around the world that are starting to realize that, oh, shochu and awamori are not, we can't really just put them in the Asian spirits group. That's really, really not fair. It's really wrong. And to put it, some places just go shochu, soju, like together. How do you judge those two drinks side by side? They're completely different. It's like judging a single malt scotch against a I don't know, a 3 times filtered vodka. They're not the same drink, so they shouldn't be in the same class. So there's we're still learning, we're still growing, and in Japan, it's just not anywhere near the same level of competition and development or recognition that sake Nihonshu gets.
Yeah, I guess so. And for tasting, what? I mean, it's obviously it's a complicated question, and also it's very particular because everyone has their own taste. But for you, what makes you happy when you drink a shochu? I mean, what is the things that you look for a good drink? I mean, is there anything that the flavors or the aroma? What is that is particularly touching you when you drink shochu?
It's a great question, and it's a great question because it shows how complicated the drink is. So it depends on the type of shochu that you're drinking and how you're drinking it. So if I'm drinking sweet potato shochu on the rocks versus with club soda versus with hot water or straight even just by itself, it's 4 totally different worlds. Now, because if we're talking about actually tasting shochu, sweet potato shochu, when you try it neat, of course you're looking for, I try it without looking at the label. I try and figure out kind of what type of sweet potato might be used, and there's so many different ones, right? Then you've got 3 different types of koji, so you can often guess that just by the aroma. But there's so much diversity in the category that it's hard to really say, oh, a sweet potato shochu tastes like this, because that's very limiting. That's not possible. So I would say for the type of sweet potato shochu that I like, I'm looking for something that has a lot of depth. I don't really like the lighter stuff. I like something that is really ashy, minerally, maybe has a little bit of a conifer type of foresty quality to it, and bready, and the koji has to be there in enough quantity to be recognizable. But I'm looking for something with some character, and I think that's what happens to people when you become really interested in something. You just go for deeper and deeper and deeper flavors. I mean, you end up in kimoto territory pretty quickly, right? Once you really get into seishu. So it's the same thing. I'm looking for really something that's going to be kind of have a little bit of umami to it, or I'm looking for something completely different that's going to surprise me. That I haven't tried before. And there's a lot of that these days, which is nice. It's quite fun.
Good. And then for the cocktail world, what do you think about cocktails and shochus and stuff? What is your idea?
That's kind of one of the avenues that I think shochu is headed towards, and I've been doing my best to study cocktails as much as I can, just to be able to give pointers to help out. But I think, I mean, if you go to New York City, for instance, and there are, as you know, there are tons of great bars, it's actually pretty surprising how often you will see a shochu on the menu. And there's a lot of bartenders who are starting to say, oh, wow, this is a really diverse category.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make something that will help me win a cocktail competition, you know, because it might be a flavor that people haven't used yet.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got like sesame shochu is really rich and deep and nutty, and it's really nice. And then you've got, going from that, you could head straight over into lighter territory, and you've got some super ginjo-esque rice shochu, and then somewhere in the middle you've got, I don't know, so let's do something crazy. Let's go for like a kelp shochu, or let's get a water chestnut shochu, or one of my favorite oddballs, the matatabi shochu, the silver vine shochu, and that's basically, you know, for lack of a, I mean, it's basically catnip, or catnip's cousin, you know. So it's kind of out there. It's like a mountain vine. It's amazing, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for bartenders to dig in here and find something new. Of course, a lot of stuff is a little bit lower proof, but these days low calorie cocktails are a big thing, right? Shochu's your jam there. Shochu's the lowest calorie spirit possibly in the world. And you know,
wow,
and if you need something that's
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, and people don't really know that. There's a problem with communication somehow, because it's a big thing. I mean, it would be great to target as not a healthy drink, but you know, at least low calories stuff. So
it's a benefit. It's extremely low calorie. So you know, if you want to Google something very interesting, just Google the shochu diet, which is, you know, if you just switch from full body reds or craft beers and you switch to shochu, you're going to cut a lot of calories.
That's
so
amazing.
You don't really have to stop drinking.
I mean, of course, but by the alcohol and that, I would think it would be very calorific. Does it apply for Awamori as well?
Yes, it does. It does, because they're single distilled drinks. They tend to be a little bit lower alcohol. So Awamori usually is 30%. Shochu is usually 25%. But there are no additives.
Wow.
You know, you can't sweeten them. You can't change the color. You can't add caramel to, you know, balance things out. So it's basically the only calories are from the alcohol itself. And what, there's 7 kilocalories per milligram of alcohol. Amazing. Yeah, shochu wins. It's pretty easy, you know.
Yeah,
so
now I know how to sell this, because it was hard here in Spain. Now I and
there you go.
Listen, for the now what I was going to ask you, for the hangover, how is it?
Okay, listen, I have studied this extensively, and I would say that as long as you don't mix your drinks, as long as you don't go from wine to shochu to whiskey to shochu to brandy to sake to shochu, as long as you don't do that, it has a very low impact.
Wow.
Now, alcohol is alcohol. If you overdo it, you're going to hate yourself in the morning. That's a fact. And it really doesn't matter what type of alcohol it is. Ethanol is going to get you in the long run. However, you can drink a fair amount of shochu, and as long as you don't overdo it, the next day you'll feel like, oh yeah, I was drinking, but you're going to be functional. You'll be fine. And that's one thing that the industry is always saying. Yeah.
We have 5 seconds left. We come back and we say goodbye, because it passed by very, very quickly.
Got it.